My name is David Masters. I had a 3 day long out of body experience when I was very young. And I think the background that leads up to that is also significant because I can tell you that before there were such things as indigo children, which is sort of a new popular way of looking at kids that have whatever gifts that they are given at birth. I was one of those kids. And nobody really understood back when I was a child, I mean, a long time ago, what these gifts were about. And as a matter of fact, if you talked about gifts, and I'm talking about the gift of a kind of intuition, which allowed me to look into people's homes and as if a portal would open up in the middle of my forehead and I could see the kind of energies and I could feel the kind of energies that were going on in the home. So I started having experiences, I probably would say around maybe 10 years old. And I went to a friend's house one day. I went over to see if he was home. And I got outside of his house and I stopped. And this little portal in the middle of my forehead opened up. And I saw that there was bad energy in this home, just bad. And I could see that there was even some domestic violence and things of that nature. And I actually literally turned around and walked away, puzzled, because I didn't know what I was experiencing. I didn't really understand it. But I also felt that I had to follow my intuition and not try to go into that home. And I followed my intuition. And I've had this ability to see things ever since I was a child, as I said. And I can give you another instance of me seeing things that other people just didn't see. And of course, this is going to make me sound like a kook, but I don't care because it actually happened. I used to live in Hawaii. My parents moved there when I was probably 12 years old. And one day, I'm sitting out on the seawall because we were right on the beach on the island of Oahu, and the sun's going down. So I look out at the ocean, maybe a mile and a half out. I see this little black dot bobbing up and down and sort of disappearing as the swells would come in. And I wondered what it was. I thought, what the heck is that? Usually, if it was a boat, you'd see it move, but this thing was stationary and I'd never seen it there before. And so as I watched it, probably 10 minutes, uh, from, let's just say, from left to right, a jumbo jet came into my view, was going to land at the Honolulu airport. And as soon as it passed by, like let's say I'm here and the plane is passing over this way, this little black dot lifted straight up out of the water, went up to the level that the aircraft was, and got right behind the aircraft in its what they call contrail, and then it just zipped out into space. And I was probably 12 and a half years old when that happened. I started running around the beach. Did anybody else see that? Did anybody see that? No, nobody saw it. Not me, just me. So I've been seeing things like this. And by the way, that is emblazoned in my mind. That experience totally stuck in my head. So I've seen things, I've seen a lot of things that cannot be explained throughout the course of my life. So coming up to when I was 13 years old, now I did not die, but one night I'm asleep and I wake up the next morning and here I am tethered, my conscious mind. I don't know if it was my soul, my conscious mind, I don't know, but it was like a balloon, like a helium balloon tied by an invisible string to my body, and it was hovering about 5, 6 feet above me. And I was watching myself sleep. And when I woke up, I watched myself get up, brush my teeth, go into the kitchen, get ready for school. And I'm watching all of this from above myself. And this was just, I didn't understand it again. And I know that people have these spontaneous out of body experiences, but this was 13 years old. What did I know when I was 13 years old? Nothing. So that day I went to school and I'm having conversations, watching myself, having conversations with my friends. I'm seeing myself speak. I'm aware of every move that I make, my body language. I'm just completely aware of myself in relationship to other people. And this goes on the entire day. Come back home, the end of the day, lights out, go to sleep. I'm still there, hovering above myself. And I'm wondering, is this ever going to end? And the next day it happens again. Watch myself all day long. Now, what was interesting about this is I became aware of myself as if somebody else was watching me. Although I knew it was me, it was my face, my body, my being, but I was a separate consciousness from what was going on with me, the human. And the human continued to operate sort of absolutely normally, which I also found to be quite strange because what was it then that I was in that state of having been separated consciously from my body? Again, these were the things that began to occur to me. It's like, how is it possible that for me to be continuing to interact with the people in this world as I always would? But I didn't have any feeling about it. In other words, I didn't have any sense that I was not being myself, the person, the human part of me. And the conscious part of me was almost scientific in nature, just watching, seeing, knowing that I was communicating, hearing all the conversation. And this happened all day long again. Go back home, lights out, and there I am up on the ceiling watching myself sleep again. But here's the other thing that was interesting about it. I have never had a sense of time. After the first incident where I realized that I was out of my body, I lost track of time. And as if, at first I wondered, how long will this go? When will I go back into myself, into my body? And then after that, I sort of lost track of it almost instantly. So the second day, I'm on the ceiling at nighttime. I wake up on the third day, and there it is again. 3 days out of my body now. And I only know that because I remember the days kind of doing those things that you do every day, watching myself every day. And at that point, I had consciously adjusted to being separate from my body. It was on automatic pilot, basically, doing whatever it was going to do. And I watched it, and I began to see something very profound. As again, I'm maybe 13 years old, but it became very clear to me that whatever I am, whatever the essence of who I am is, I am not my body. So my body was a component, but it was like a car. Your car does what your car does, your body does what your body does, and you're the driver. And that was the sense that I got from that whole experience. And so I go home, you know, eat dinner, interact with everybody, and then lights out, and there I am hovering. But the next morning when I woke up, I was back in myself. My consciousness was back in my body, and I had a complete and full memory of everything that happened during that period of time. And again, that is one of those experiences that has never left me. And the takeaway from that experience was that we are not this flesh and blood vehicle. And I knew that from that point on in my life. Now, that experience had a profound effect on me in the sense that it informed everything else about my life. Now, that didn't mean that I had any kind of special anything about me. I didn't have any sense of clairvoyance, although I was developing something, though. Something was formulating or coalescing within me around that experience. And so as I got to be in my early teens, like 15, 16 years old, I started to be able to have a vision of people's dreams. And when somebody would describe a dream they had, let's just say it was, family member, I could see that dream as if I was watching a movie. And I saw all the elements that were involved in that dream. And in that sense, dreams were no longer mysterious to me. Dreams actually were stories that were being told to us subconsciously. So after my experience, as I got into my later teen years, I began to be able to understand people's dreams. And so, in other words, when somebody was describing a dream, I would be like watching a movie, and I could see the images of the dream, and the images spoke to me. And so the meaning of dreams began to become clear to me. It wasn't just a bunch of Memorex or gobbledygook, although some dreams I saw were just like a replay of experiences that people had the day before. There were deep meanings in the dreams that people were having sometimes, and I was able to interpret those. And as my life went on, as I got older, in my 20s, it became very powerful. My ability to just visualize what people were saying. So after my out of body experience, I began to be able to understand the meaning of dreams. And what I mean by that is that when I got to be 15 or 16 years old, I remember one day I overheard somebody talking about a dream they had. I said, "Well, I know what that means." And they were astounded that I could interpret what seemed to them just to be sort of a mass of images and random ideas. It was clear to me. And I remember thinking, well, how do I know that now? But as I got older, it became more clear to me that the ability to interpret the meanings of people's dreams became easier and easier and more, I would say, lucid, in the sense that the story that was being told in the dream became very self-evident to me. And so much so that I don't know if I mentioned this, but I have been on Coast to Coast AM many times. I'm their favorite person to talk to about dreams. And that's with George Norrie. Used to be with Art Bell back in the day. But George Norrie said, of all the people I've talked to 5,000 people. This is what George Norrie said: "David, you're the only one that knows what you're talking about." So this is I think, part of the side effect of this out of body experience, because the out of body experience freed me from the limitations of the known, basically, is what it boils down to. And I don't know if it was the length of time. It was literally 3 days. or if it was just the fact that I was out of my body and able to exist in that other realm long enough to be able to have the clarity. I don't know. I don't know if I'll ever know until after this life is over. So anyway, when I was in my 30s, this is where it gets really interesting. I had a vision in a dream. And in this dream, I'm driving my car and I see a friend and I pull up on this little, like a hilly driveway. And what happens next is terrifying because when I pulled up my car, I forgot to put the car, it was an automatic, I forgot to put it in park. And I went to get out. And my son, my 4-year-old son, was in the back seat and he went to get out at the same time. And in the dream, I saw the car swing around off of that hill and run over my son, kill him. And so, see, this is slightly different scenario than a person who has a near-death experience because this was a death-prevented experience. So I woke up from the dream and I was weeping, and it was so clear to me, so real to me, it was as if it had almost happened. And I told my wife, I said, I just saw myself run over our son. And it was so impactful to me. I couldn't shake it. Exactly 3 days later, very scenario that I dreamed about actually took place in real life. I saw the friend, I'm driving down a road, I saw the friend, I pull up on this sloped driveway. I forget to put the car in park. My son goes to get out of the back seat, except for one thing happens. What I saw in the dream activated me, and I grabbed him just as he was going out, as the car was swinging out into the street, and I held him. And then I realized that I had seen this dream and that the dream had informed me of an event that was going to happen. And so this is probably one of the most significant experiences of my life because what it does is it allows you to know this is that premonitions are real and life preventing premonitions are real. But if you're not paying attention, then you find out the hard way. And I don't know how many people have said in the course of their life, I should have listened to myself. But there's something in every human being that is calling to them to begin to pay attention to this premonition side, this clairvoyant side, this intuitive side. And it started with me. I couldn't deny it when it happened to me. I was yanked out of my body. It wasn't violent or anything. It was just there I was, watching myself objectively, scientifically, and emotionally. And then when I entered back into my body, I believe that set off a domino effect of events that led up to this particular dream that I had when I was probably 34, 35 years old that prevented a tragedy. So this is a different take on near-death experiences because in a sense, it might have been a complete death experience. But because of the vision that I was shown, it was a terrible tragedy was prevented. But I started meditating when I was 17 years old. I could have died in 3 separate accidents. I was a surfer. One day I went out surfing and I heard a voice warn me. Again, this is this intuitive thing. The voice said to me, "Don't go surfing today." And I remember hearing it so clear, but my response was really bad. I said, "Go to hell. I'm going to go surfing." So I tried to ignore that voice. And when I went out surfing, I fell off and I punctured my lung. Now, I got to tell you, when you get a punctured lung, you can barely move. And I don't know how I ended up in the shallow water, but I did after I fell off my board and I hit the bottom, and it was pretty severe. I couldn't breathe. Strangely enough, I was the only person there that day in the water. A friend of mine comes jogging by, a girl I knew in high school, and she saw me laying there and she thought I was joking and messing around. And she continued running past me. And so when she came on her way back, I was still laying there. This was probably 5, 10 minutes later. And I could barely move. And she came over and looked at me and she says, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm hurt." So the ambulance came and they picked me up and they took me to the hospital. So that's another one of those experiences where, you don't know what you're missing when you're not paying attention. See, now I was paying attention, but I just said, "I'm not listening to this warning. I got free will. I can do whatever I want." But again, is there something there that potentially we all have that's trying to guide us? What do you want to call it? Is it God? Are there guardian angels? Are there spirits that are watching after us? I believe there are. So I've digressed for a minute because I've seen my guardian angels. When I was 17 years old, I'll never forget this. I had an argument with my dad. Very, very angry. I was so angry that I stormed out of the house and I was determined I am never going back there again. And I'm walking down the street. I get about a mile from my house. It was a foggy day because I lived down at the beach. And all of a sudden, I look above me, and there are two huge faces, cherubic faces, cherubs, angelic looking. And I thought, okay, I'm hallucinating. No, because one of them said to me, and I could hear it audibly, "There's nothing out there for you." What? Said it again. "There's nothing out there for you." Well, that set me back. And I thought about it for a minute. And I thought, okay, this is one of those warnings. I didn't listen. This was after I had my accident. I didn't listen to the warning with the accident. Better listen to this one. I turned around, went home, told my dad I was sorry for being so angry. So at that point, I started meditating. At this point in my life, I've meditated for probably 50,000 hours. And through the meditation that I practice, a stilling of the mind, I have received insights throughout the course of my life. And I've just written a book on life after death, among other things. But this is the story. My story is this: you have a higher consciousness attached to an amazingly protective force that oversees the entire universe. And if you will pay attention to it, you will live out a blueprint that is different than the one that you're living right now. We have two blueprints, one that will work and is functional, and the other leads you down a path of unhappiness and heartbreak and suffering. So I had to learn the hard way a couple of times, but I learned to listen. And by listening, the scripture says, "Be still and know." By listening, you learn and you are shown and you're given insight and direction and peace. Some of my story I do have a website. It's escapeyourmindsprison.com, escapeyourmindsprison.com. And you can learn more about me if you just visit my website, escapeyourmindsprison.com. So I got interested in near-death experiences at a very young age, and I was involved in the radio business. So I produced Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell, who passed away in, I think, 2001. And then his program was taken over by George Norrie. But up until that point in time, I had spent thousands of hours researching what people experienced in their near-death experiences. Now, there are two kinds of experiences. Obviously, there are the positive experiences where people relate what they see when they go to the other side. And also, there are those experiences where people go to the dark side, to the place of suffering. Now, for me, I am a person who is insatiably curious. I have an insatiable appetite for understanding. The things of the world are very two-dimensional to me. So I've always been a person who, ever since I was very young, I never fit in like everybody else did. I was always kind of an outsider looking in. And I've always been interested in trying to fathom the meaning of death, because death has meaning. I mean, birth is the first part of your life. It's the first most important thing that ever happens to you. And then the end, death, is the next most important thing that happens to you. And I'm not one of those people that ever believed that there was just a flat line. I've always sensed, ever since I was very young, that there was this other life waiting for me, and for everybody, I guess you would say. So I got very interested in the research, and near-death experiences were, to me, almost like postal delivery from the other side. Like somebody has an experience and they go and they relate what they saw, and then they come back and tell you about it. So if an astronaut goes to the moon, and then they come back and they tell you what their experience is like. Now, obviously, you don't have the experience just because somebody relates it to you, but it begins to inform a story of your life. And I really particularly like the negative stories, because many of the people that come back are absolutely transformed. Their lives are absolutely transformed. There's one story of a man named Howard Storm, who was an atheist, and he was on vacation in France when he became very ill, and he had a near-death experience in which he died. It wasn't for very long, but he died. And then he had this terrible experience where he ended up in a dark place where these monsters were tearing him apart. And then he remembered something. And this is the story he tells. He thought, this is it. This is my experience that has led me here, and this is where I'm going to stay. Then something occurred to him. And it was a song that he learned as a child. This is the song. Jesus loves me. This I know, because the Bible tells me so. And he started to repeat that in his mind. And as he did, a light appeared from above, came down into the darkness. The monsters that were clawing away at him backed away, and arms came out of this light and picked him up and took him up into a celestial realm where he was shown a great many things. He came back, became a minister. This happens to people frequently, where they have these encounters that are so awakening, and they're so humbling, and they feel love like they've never felt it before. And so that's just one of the encounters that I thought was very significant. And I've been researching, and I continue to research. And this is my book. It's called Knowing Where You're Going Before You Leave. Let me pull it up now because I forgot the name of my own book. The Journey into Your Life After Death, Knowing Where You're Going Before You Leave. I mean, wouldn't you like to have a roadmap, in a manner of speaking? So, you know, knowing where you're going before you leave is pretty cool, I think. First of all, I read a scripture and I don't even remember what it was. But essentially, what the scripture said is that after this life, if you are a person who is inclined toward the love of God, when you leave this world and you go into the next, you go directly into the service of the Creator. And I wish I knew what the scripture was that I read, but it didn't matter anymore because I realized, I mean, I never thought that heaven was a vacation spot. In other words, if there is a forever, can you imagine just sitting around doing whatever you want to forever? I can't personally. Because in this life, I feel like the highest calling a person can have is to help other people. And I want to continue doing that. And so if I'm not doing it on this earth, if there is a continuation of doing that in a heavenly realm, if the creator of all things says to you, I have a mission for you. I have a job for you. I want you to go over here and supervise this. To me, that's kind of like, that's what I want. I just don't want to go on vacation from this crappy life that I've lived so far. Not that it's that crappy, but I want a greater purpose. And so that's what I was shown. I think it's kind of cool. I think a lot of people think, well, you know, I've suffered. I think I deserve a rest. No, I don't want to rest. I'm never going to retire. I'm going to work until the last breath I take. I'm going to do what I can do to help people, which is what I'm doing. I've been doing it since I was 19 years old when I stopped being a selfish fool, although that was the beginning. I didn't stop being a selfish fool then because it's a lifetime of progression of learning, and I call it the conscious process of elimination. You know, you see things about yourself and you say, I don't want to be that way anymore. And then you move to the next thing. And systematically, you're given more insight in ways in which you can help people and in ways you can change your life and be effective in your life. And so when I realized that, you know, we could go into service for our Creator, it was very exciting to me. You know, I do a radio show every day, and I shared that idea on the radio. I'm on about 35 radio stations, and a friend of mine who works for a major radio personality listens to my show. And he texted me, he says, I love what you just said. Because I think that most people see, in other words, it also gives us something to look forward to on that other side. I don't want to just idle. I don't even care. I mean, I'm a surfer. I love surfing. I love snowboarding. Those are the things that I love, you know, beside my family in this life. I don't care about that after this. There's got to be something more, something great for us to experience there. Something that's not just of this earth. Experience I had when I was 13 years old is, I would say, almost identical to people who have near-death experiences and come back to life, because they are simply not gone. In other words, their consciousness lingers, and it doesn't matter how long they're dead. If they're dead for 5 minutes or an hour, it's all the same. For me, it was a 3-day long experience. I don't know why it lasted that long, although it is significant of the, you know, a resurrection process that maybe it takes a certain amount of time on this earthly plane to get connected to the next ethereal plane. I don't know. But the experience, I believe, was very, very almost identical to near-death experiences. Now, in the dream state, that is a different level of it, because I believe that the dream state, the subconscious mind, has access to that realm, also the ethereal realm, because what happens in dreams, and especially in prophetic dreams, Einstein saw himself riding on a beam of light and he discovered his theory of relativity from a dream. That had to be shown to him, it had to be delivered to him not in the waking hours, because he was a brilliant man. He was one of the most brilliant mathematicians ever. But his most important discovery was given to him in a dream. And by the way, many people have discovered incredible things in dreams that, they don't think that they would have discovered unless it were in a dream. And the reason why is because when you're dreaming, the filters of the mind are removed. And so in our waking hours, we are distracted by all the things that we have to attend to in this life. Then when you close your eyes and you shut down the active mind, the subconscious mind becomes activatable. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody who has a potential for having life-changing dreams has them, because so many people are still very connected to the things of everyday life. And so they just replay the same images over and over, and they have conversations with people. That's not the legitimate dream state in which you are shown other things. And so you have to be willing at some level. I think the people that meditate are more likely and more prone to have prophetic dreams. In other words, revealed insights from that realm. And the meditation prepares your mind, because if you cannot still your mind during the normal course of your day, then all those things come flooding in. It's like having a screen door on a submarine. Everything floods into your mind, and then it just occupies your mind. So to be able to prepare your mind for the dream state, and there's a line there. It's a territory. It's almost like a boundary. There's a boundary line between the subconscious realm and the waking realm. And if you're not prepared to enter into that subconscious realm, then you don't see the door. And whatever the door is, wherever it exists in that place when you close your eyes, doesn't occur to you. I mean, a lot of people do have significant dreams, but and this is why journaling helps people to get in touch with whatever their dreams are trying to tell them. But at the same time, when I have a dream, it is as if I had an experience. It's not just a dream to me. So, and I don't have that many dreams, strangely enough. And I'm aware of the difference between what's going on in my head, all the stuff that's trying to occupy my mind, coming through the screen door on my submarine. I could just see it and I watch it. And again, what is meditation? Meditation is, if you could use the example of you're sitting on the shore next to a river, and the river is flowing and things are going downstream. There's boats and people on rafts, and there's all kinds of stuff going downstream in that river. Now, you're either in that river or you're on the bank observing those things that are going down the river, called the thought stream. And so to sit on the bank allows you to be an observer of those things. And that way you're able to choose the content of what you allow into your mind. So if you find something interesting going down the thought stream, you can pull it up like you do on your computer and look at it and then dismiss it. But see, most people do not have that range of choice-making mechanisms in their head. And so just to give you an example, if you hear a song and it keeps playing over and over in your head, Panic at Detroit by David Bowie, keeps playing in my head. Okay, I watch it, and then there are times where I go away. See, I'm conscious that I don't want it to keep playing in my head. It wants to play. My brain wants it to play. It's one of my favorite songs. But I don't want it there right now. I need it to go away. And when I make that awareness my priority, and if I say, not now, to myself, all of a sudden it's gone. Now something else comes in. Something I needed to think about. Not this stupid song, even though I like it. The song doesn't dominate my thinking processes. It doesn't distract me. So that's just one thing. That's one element of it, because we are choice-making machines is what we are. But if we are not consciously involved in making the choices, then those choices are being made for us. And part of that equation is that life has a hypnotic effect on people. Now, what is hypnosis? We'll get into this because hypnosis is a realm of subconscious, but it is a realm of subconscious based on abandonment of free will. And the only way people can actually be hypnotized is if they agree to allow some other force to influence them. So there are only a certain number of people. I've been to hypnotic demonstrations before where the hypnotist will do an exercise, and he will say to people, and I'm saying, nobody do this. Just listen to what I'm saying. The hypnotist will say, I want you to clasp your hands together. And he will say, now some of you, and he says, I want you to squeeze them as tight as you can. Squeeze them. And you give all your attention to following that instruction. You see what's happening already? You're following the instruction of the hypnotist, and you're allowing him to begin to dictate your behavior. And so then the hypnotist will say, there will be those of you in the audience who cannot unclasp your hands. And sure enough, if they're in a crowd of 500 people or 100 people, about 10% of those people, maybe fewer, will not be able to undo their hands. Their hands are stuck together. So then the hypnotist will call them up on stage and say, now, relax your hands. And of course, right there, their hands release. But you see, it's a subconscious function of allowing other people to make your choices and decisions for you. And so life has a hypnotic effect on us. And of course, we were born into an environment. We learn the language of that environment. We learn the customs of that environment. That environment shapes our personality, and we absorb all that we know from that environment. And so, of course, a person can conclude, well, this is who I am. But is it really? Is this really who we are? If we are the sum total of our experiences in our environment? And the answer is it's not. There's more to you than that. And that is where the intuitive self and the conscious self and the conscience itself come into play, because the environment is not always right. As a matter of fact, much of the time the environment feeds you a lot of nonsense and counterintuitive ideas. And if you take a look at how there are people now in the government that are trying to ban TikTok, it's because the people who are feeding stuff to us through TikTok know that we don't have a firewall for our mind. We're used to absorbing information from the outside world and regurgitating and acting upon it. And so we have these stupid kids that are now, the Tide Pod Challenge, and the kids that are throwing themselves through the fences only because somebody said, here's a challenge. That subconscious mind just says, oh, there's a direction, even as stupid as it may be. So there's a lot more to life, and there's a lot more to be experienced in life if for the person who has a trained mind. And if you take a look at just somebody like Elon Musk, doing things that no matter how many governments got involved, I mean, we're talking about the reach of the human species out into space. This one guy is responsible, and I believe he will put people on Mars in the next few years. Governments were never going to be able to do that. They didn't have the will to do it. They have a bunch of intellectual eggheads trying to figure out how to do things that can only be done intuitively. This is how Elon Musk was able to design and create these reusable landing vehicles. Government wasn't going to get there for years and years and years and years. Elon Musk is a perfect example of a person who functions from intuition. Albert Einstein functioned from intuition. There are great people in the world who have changed the world because they followed their intuition. But unfortunately, there are few and far between. What it says to me, first of all, is that you have a deep connection with your parents. And let me just give you another example. With people that you have a connection to, have you ever thought of them and all of a sudden they call you? Here's the thing, in the ethereal plane, In other words, this is this cosmic plane of consciousness. We have we almost like a cell phone connection to those people. And the evidence of that is that, just to give you, your dream is one. So there was a communication that was coming through this plane of consciousness to you from them, and you picked up on it. Now, that says something about you as a human being, as a special person in a way, because there are people who, like you said, are taught not to listen to their intuition. As a matter of fact, most people are taught not to follow their intuition. So, there was a book called The Fifth Wave, written by Alvin Toffler, who was a famous futurist back in the 90s. And he said that the future will be controlled by the intuitives. So are you one of those people? Are you an intuitive? I call myself, like, I was an indigo child before there was such a thing. I was born this way. I don't know why. And it is a gift to have that intuitive nature. You can develop it, by the way, by just simply not wanting to be subject to all the laws of the universe and the forces of nature. You want to rise above it, you conquer it, right? You can do that. It's kind of a mental yoga in that sense, where you exercise your mind and you stretch your mind, because your mind will expand to, and the information and the insight will expand in the amount of space that it's given. But most people, they don't. They let the world fill it up. They let the outside world, the social media, the influencers, and of course, how can you have influencers if there aren't influencees? Well, everybody's an influencee, except for if you decide, I'm not going to be one of them. So then you break away from the herd mentality. You break away from the Borg, the group think. You get away from it. Then you begin to develop a unique signature in this world. And you're probably one of those people, because you picked up on that from your parents. It just tells you something about yourself. To that is that it's important that you have a balance, right? Because if you're all free flowing and you just go, you're following always the intuitive things without reasoning it, well, maybe that's not a good idea. Sometimes you get intuitive hits that are kind of like, but maybe that's not a good idea. So I had a just to give you an example, I was going to buy a bigger home, and I could afford it, and it was just right for me. And then something said to me, no, what do you mean no? No, not a good time. So I looked at that and I reasoned. See, and this is the part of you that you're talking about being analytical. It's not necessarily an analytical part of you, but it is a deliberate part of you. It's a part of you that looks at the why and the why not. And that's a balance, see? So it's good to have the intuition always at work, balanced out by the, as you call it, the analytical side, which is the reasoning side. Well, my message would be to everyone, look deeper. Don't get stuck on the surface of life like a fly on flypaper. Look deeper, and if there's resistance to looking deeper, then ask yourself, why? Why is it that there is a resistance here in me to seeing the things that could be shown to me? And I would say that you'll come up against your conditioning. And your conditioning and your programming, it's a comfort zone, but of course, it is a stagnant pool, because there's only so much, there's no flowing water in there. It's there, and it's where you've been. And I would say, look deeper and ask why, and then also ask to be shown. Because there is, are you talking to yourself? Because I don't talk to myself, but I do speak my needs, my wishes, my desires to know more truth. I speak that out into cosmos, the universe, because speaking, we are unique in the sense that we have been given the gift of language, and it occupies a huge part of our brain. The skills required, the mechanisms required for us to communicate verbally and to have thought that translates into words, man, that's just amazing. I mean, look what they're doing with technology right now. They're trying to figure out how to make, AI interactive. A lot that goes into it, but with us, it's instantaneous. Now, I don't rehearse anything I'm going to say. I let it flow through me, but it all is a result of an inquiry, and it's a result of an excavation in my own life and discovering what's there in my own life and around me. And so go deeper. The scripture says, ask and you shall receive. If you are a person who wants to know, there's no reason why you can't know. And again, I have a website. It's called escapeyourmindsprison.com. And I've just published, I have 3 books. My second book I'm about to publish is called The Present. And because it has a double meaning. Life is a gift, right? And now is all there is. But there is no tomorrow. There's no yesterday. It doesn't exist. It's all a construct of your thinking and your imagination and your memory. But all that actually exists is right now. And this right now is a gift. It's a total gift. And what you do with it determines whether or not it's a wonderful gift or a terrible gift. So yeah, my book, The Present, the first chapter is published on my website, escapeyourmindsprison.com. And also I have a meditation there, which I've been teaching for the last 45 years. There's a video there that you can listen to and tune into. And there's an explanation, about an 8-minute explanation at the front of it. And then there's an 8 to 10 minute meditation, which is very free. So that's my message.